Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for inviting me. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's a great honor and privilege for me to appear before this House. I have fond memories of the 10 years I spent as a member of this House. I feel honored and gratified to be back. The only disadvantage is I cannot sit at the place where I used to sit. But other than that, I'm good. I'm happy to see old and new colleagues. And Mr. Speaker, I'll do my best to respond to the question raised by the distinguished Senator for Samburu, the Honorable Dr. Lelegwe, as follows. Mr. Speaker, on 13th of February this year, the government of Kenya decided to deploy a joint operation for purposes of restoring normalcy in Samburu and 4 other counties in Northern Rift Valley. Mr. Speaker, sir, this came after serious incidences of breach of peace. And therefore, it was required that the efforts of the National Police Service, which is the organ responsible for internal security, be augmented and supported by the Kenya Defense Forces in accordance to our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, sir, the government had 2 options. One, to deploy the KDF to support the National Police Service pursuant to Article 241, 3B, whereby the National Police Service is still in charge and leads the operation, but gets support from the KDF, that support being defined in the operational order agreed upon between the Inspector General of the National Police Service and the Chief of the Defense Forces. The second option which was available was to apply Article 241 3C, where the police would cede the way and allow the military to move in, restore peace and order, and retreat back and allow the police to continue after the operation. It was decided to apply 241 3B first because the architecture of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, envisages an escalation of measures where the government intends to bring in the KDF. The intention of the framers of the Constitution is first to escalate the deployment gradually. If the police require the KDF input, then that input comes under paragraph B. And if there is need to escalate it to paragraph C, then that would come as a consequence later on. And that's why we took that approach. Mr. Speaker, sir, the status of security in Samburu County since the deployment of the military to assist the police has improved tremendously. the situation has improved from what was the case before the operation was declared. Mr. Speaker, sir, we immediately identified certain parts of Samburu County and the other 4 counties which were being used to hold or to hold and hide bandits. And we asked members of the public to vacate from those places. And this, for the information of the House, Mr. Speaker, these are not habitual places of residence. In fact, the mischief we were trying to cure is that we had established that after stealing livestock, these bandits would retreat to very remote caves and gorges, which are not places of habitual residence. Hide there, and they could survey or try and track what we had, the rest of our agencies were doing and the rest of the public, and plan further attacks from there. But they had invited what we considered perhaps members of their families. So we established their women and children holed up in those caves and gorges, and that's why we gave the kind of orders we gave after declaring these places disturbed and dangerous. The situation has improved, but after we gave the 24-hour orders for the public to leave these dangerous places, which were gazetted and publicized, the unintended but expected consequence was that some of the criminals took the 24-hour notice to mix with the rest of the population, because after 24 hours, we were able to dominate all the places we identified. And I can report to the House today, Mr. Speaker, that all the places, the caves, the gorges, the ravines, all the places that were being used as hideouts for bandits in Baringo, Laikipia, Samburu, Turkana, and West Pokot counties, and Elgeyo Marakwet, those places are clean, have been cleared and dominated by security forces. Our intention now is to make sure that those bandits will never, never, never get to access those places again. We'll do so by ensuring that our presence and the presence of security agencies in these areas is going to remain permanent. Even after we call off the operation, we will not withdraw the presence of security officers. They will dominate those areas and make it impossible for bandits to retreat to the Corcoran Hills in Baringo, Tandare Valley, the Pura Valley, Malaso Escarpment, and all the gorges and caves that were identified. So I think we need to clarify for the public interest, through you, Mr. Speaker, that those orders were not targeting habitual places of public residence. They were targeting specific, remote, and uninhabited areas where bandits could retreat and plan attacks, but then, pursuant to the requirement of international law on the use of force, we are to give a notice, because some would ask, why give a notice to bandits to vacate? The target was not on bandits. In fact, we did not expect them to vacate. We did not expect them to vacate because these bandits had grown horns and were full of impunity and theatrics. That notice was intended at the general public. They could be members of their families, women and children, because under international law, if you're going to use force, then you must ensure that that force is targeted at armed criminals or belligerents or people who are resisting authority, and members of the public should have that notice. And I am happy to report, Mr. Speaker, those places are now clear. With regard to the attacks that we continue to experience in those areas is as a result of some of the bandits who took the 24-hour window to mix up with the public. We are working very hard to make sure that we also extinguish the remaining threats. And therefore, in a nutshell, the operation, in our view, is a success. We have learned in the last 2 months there are still gaps. We are going to seal the gaps. We will stay there as long as it takes. I want to assure the people of Samburu County and all the other counties affected, including counties affected by this menace, but which are not part of the operation yet. I want to assure them the crime of violent cattle theft, rustling, banditry, and visiting terror on the public by criminals. We will make sure that that culture and that practice is finished and it will be part of the history of Kenya. We are determined to do whatever it takes. It takes a while because of the intricacies involved, but Honorable Speaker, we are on course and we will win the war. It's either Kenya or bandits. It's either the law or crime. One has to give way. Kenya will not give way. The government will not give way. The people of Kenya will not give way. Bandits, criminals, have to give way. Honorable Speaker, with regard to the second part of the question, I would like to respond as follows. The measures that we are taking, other than the military and police action to flush out criminals, includes improving our intelligence so that we work on intelligence based on intelligence-led security. We've made great strides in strengthening multi-agency intelligence sharing, even within the organs of the national security. Within the National Intelligence Service, National Police Service, other agencies that are involved in the security of our country, we are investing heavily on intelligence. And the same way, Mr. Speaker, the enhancement of intelligence-led security has helped us to contain the threat of terrorism. I am convinced beyond doubt that Kenya will win against bandits through intelligence-led security operations. Number two, we have deployed and enhanced the Special Operation Group, which is one of the formed units of the National Police Service. And Mr. Speaker, for the information of the House, the future of our country winning over sophisticated and complex crime, including banditry, terrorism, drug trafficking, the future is in the specialized formed units of the National Police Service. We have a number of these formed units: Special Operations Group, the Rapid Deployment Unit, the Anti-Stock Theft Unit, and others, including the General Service Unit. These are our front-line soldiers in the fight against complex crime. And therefore, with regard to the measures taken in Samburu West, we have deployed in the last few weeks the Special Operation Group, which helped us a great deal 2 months ago to stabilize Samburu North, the area of Baragoi. There were gunshots every day, deaths and bloodshed every day. But the Senator of Samburu and the people of Samburu will tell you from December last year, that area has been cleared. And the challenge we have, Mr. Speaker, and we call upon Parliament, the two houses of Parliament, to support our security sector, the investments required in the specialized training of these formed units is so high, yet the results are extremely precious for this country. The war against terror was won by the formed units, including, of course, the anti-terror police unit. The war on banditry will be won by a mixture of general policing, but also the use of formed units. And therefore, we will require the support of the House. So the way we've done with Baragoi, we are now putting SOG on other parts of Samburu and also on other parts of the affected counties, even those that are not within the operation area. And I can report to the House that on Friday, I'll be visiting Elgeyo Marakwet to see the deployment of SOG because of the Koloa Bridge and the problems we've had in Marakwet East between Tiati and Marakwet. There has been cross-border raids of late. We have sealed off that area now. It's going to be a thing of the past, and so gradually we are winning the war. We'll invest in peace building. Shortly, we are starting a peace engagement, community-led peace engagement and peace building activities in all these areas because we thought we stabilize the areas first before we engage in peace building. We also do disarmament, but we've taken our time first to stabilize and silence the guns. We must disarm the public. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the nation through this House, every criminal holding firearms illegally must surrender them. They either surrender the firearm or we will take it by all means possible. And therefore, we will have a disarmament plan. We'll have a radicalization plan because just like terrorism, banditry and character wrestling has now assumed some radical ideological leanings where the people doing it are no longer doing it for culture. They are not just doing it for money. It's beyond enterprise, it's beyond culture. Increasingly, there is an ideology by those criminals that you can actually harass the public and take their property and kill them and terrorize and look important. And I want to assure the people of Kenya, we will defeat bandits. I don't know how it will take, but we'll defeat them, and banditry will be part of Kenyan history. Mr. Speaker, if we had continued to allow what was happening by the time the Kenya Kwanza administration came to office and the few months after, if we had left that continue, we would have had serious security agencies because we feared that even international terrorist networks would have infiltrated some of these groupings and complicated those matters. So, Mr. Speaker, finally, we are investing in long-term rejuvenation of the region which is affected with social amenities, public infrastructure. We are negotiating with our counterparts in the Ministry of Water, Ministry of Roads, Ministry of Energy, so that whatever quota of development projects, whatever development projects that are being launched or being planned are being funded for water, for schools, for hospitals, we are requesting for security reasons to get an enhanced quota, an enhanced package for those areas so that we open northern part of Kenya, including Samburu, and make sure that these places are also empowered, they are opened up, and I keep on saying, Mr. Speaker, the future of Kenya is in the north. There is land, there are resources, there is potential for investment. If we can silence the guns and make them safe places, the future of Kenya 100 years from now, 200 years from now is in the north of our country. I have looked at the case studies of different countries. I believe the future of this country is in the almost 3/4 of our country that is facing insecurity. If we can sort out security, that is where the future economic strength of our country will be. The same way California, in the middle of a desert, today is the backbone of the American economy. And many other countries, Australia and other places where desert territories have been turned into economic anchors for the country. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, what plans do I have for our people in Pura, Malaso, and all the other places that could have been displaced as a result of the orders I issued in Malaso on 12th of March 2023, the vacation orders? What plans do we have to make sure that they are able to normalize their lives and plant their farms? I had intended to visit that area on Friday. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have brought forward that trip to tomorrow, because on Friday I'll be in Elgeyo Marakwet. And I want to apologize to the leaders, because sometimes we give very short notices when we are traveling to your areas. It is not intentional. Unlike my colleagues in other ministries, our ministry is a ministry run on an emergency basis. We cannot plan. Other people plan where we will be. If it is not Paul Mackenzie, it is the bandits, it is other criminals, and you don't know what they are planning and what harm they'll cause where. So every day you wake up, and depending on the security situation of the country, you determine where to rush. And even as I speak, I'm rushing to Busia today, and I had not planned. So I will be visiting, in answer to the question by the senator, I'll be visiting Samburu County tomorrow afternoon to find out if there are genuine cases of people who are displaced. And from there, I'll announce the measures the government of Kenya will make to make sure that nobody who is an innocent member of the public is disrupted from their daily activities, even as we continue securitizing Samburu and Kenya as a whole. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the supplementary question raised by the distinguished senator for Samburu County, I'll reply as follows: that it is true that we have had incidents of banditry even after the deployment of the joint National Police Service and Kenya Defense Forces operation. I've explained why those attacks continue, because of a bit of a mix-up where we could have bandits spread out in villages, and although our officers are on ground, they cannot be deployed to every home. So we are looking for strategies to work around that and make sure that we mop out and finish that problem now that we know where the problem is. Mr. Speaker, we have made tremendous improvement in terms of recoveries of stolen livestock. Before the operation, we had very many livestock stolen which were not being recovered. And we are compiling actually data backwards from August and even the entire of 2022, just to show what this administration has done as compared to previously in terms of recoveries and those kind of action. I am able to report the data we have at the moment is showing marked improvement by this administration in terms of recoveries. We've had recoveries in Laikipia, recoveries in Baringo, recoveries in even in Samburu. And out of the 500 livestock stolen since January, we have recovered 200. 300 are still at large. And the reason is because these criminals, once they steal, they separate the livestock in small groups and disappear. They allocate each other 10, 5, 20, 15. So when you recover, you will hear that 200 goats have been stolen, but it will be shared with 10 each, 20 people, and they go different directions. So when you recover in bits and pieces, and that's part of the reason why we've not had 100% recovery. But again, we are working on how to improve our recovery progress. Finally, the Senator has asked about what we are doing to make sure that our officers are trained, the National Administration officers are trained and equipped. Right now, pending before the National Security Council is a proposal for a limited issuance of firearms to all chiefs, assistant chiefs, and ACCs in specific areas which are facing harsh insecurities, so that they can support the National Police Service in tracking livestock and also protecting themselves from armed criminals, because they are normally the targets. And we've lost a few already. We've lost a chief in Samburu, we've lost one in Laikipia. So we are considering a policy shift to provide firearms and also to give them training so that they can help us better serve the people of Kenya. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, all the gazetted administrative units will be operationalized, but due to budgetary constraints, we have decided to operationalize all the already gazetted areas in phases, in 3 phases, starting this financial year. We will have an objective criteria of identifying which of them goes the first phase, second phase, third phase. That objective criteria includes security challenges faced in that area, like banditry, terrorism, and other complex security issues, illicit drugs and alcohol, and then also regional balance, so that some in one region, another in another region. So we'll have a criteria of making sure that we do, starting this June, and that criteria will be made public so that we carry the entire country together. Asante. Thank you. In response to the supplementary question asked by the distinguished Senator Margaret Kamar, I would like to respond as follows. That any Kenyan who was displaced as a result of the ongoing security operation or for whatever other reason, the policy of the government of Kenya is to resettle them. As I have said earlier before this House, Mr. Speaker, we have begun tracking whether there are any victims of the orders that I issued in Malaso on 12th of March 2023, starting with Samburu tomorrow, and all the other counties will assess if there are any genuine people who are displaced as a result of those orders. The government of Kenya will facilitate either their return or their settlement so that no Kenyan is deprived of their property or deprived or removed from the habitual places of residence. I thank you.
Senator.
So, Speaker, sir, in response to the supplementary question raised by the distinguished Senator from Meru, I would like to tell the House that the use of force is an immediate, short-term, and painkiller remedy for the problem. And therefore, once we stabilize, we will roll out all the other interventions in terms of socio-economic, infrastructure, and amenity development, peace building as well. And we request the support and cooperation of the elected leaders. And I can report to this House that the ministry has already generated the appropriate framework for the reconstruction of all the affected areas, a Marshall Plan of sorts, as promised by President William Ruto during his campaigns for the presidential election, and that paper is now pending clearance at the National Security Council and the Cabinet. I can assure the nation, through you, Mr. Speaker, that in another 2 months, we will be able to announce the comprehensive Marshall Plan for permanent solutions so that we don't have these things repeating every year and for us doing the same thing every other year and expecting different results. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to respond as follows with regard to the supplementary question raised by the distinguished senator for Kakamega. We have made significant progress in tracking and nailing the masterminds of banditry. I can confidently assure the people of Kenya, we have in our radar a number of politicians of different cadres whose activities have been linked to the support, funding, and encouragement of banditry. We have crucial evidence, some of which was collected at the scene of crime at the attack in Kainuk early in the year, which incriminates political leaders and other people. I can also report to the House, we have evidence which we are almost at the tail end of finalizing and processing of the senior commanders in the banditry enterprise. Mr. Speaker, the banditry criminal enterprise has its own command. Just last week, one of the most notorious commanders of banditry was apprehended alive from the Corcoran Hills and arraigned in court. And the leaders from Baringo and those parts know who that person is. He's terrorized us and is even helping us even to zero in and fill the gaps of the investigations that are ongoing. I want to assure the House that very soon we will have high-profile arraignment of the command of bandits, whether they are civilian commanders, politicians, etc. And we want to build a case that will succeed in court. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.